Hello, and welcome to Mythos and Logos. In the highlands of Ethiopia, in monasteries perched like eagles' nests among ancient peaks, there exists a book that should not exist, a text that claims to record the words of a man who never died, who walked with angels and witnessed the architecture of heaven itself. This is the Book of Enoch, a scripture that shaped early Christianity, yet vanished from the Western world for over 1,000 years. How does a book that influenced the letter of Jude and the Book of Revelation simply disappear? How do the supposed writings of the seventh generation from Adam, a man who Genesis tells us walked with God and was no more, for God took him, survive in Ethiopian monasteries while being lost everywhere else? Tonight, we journey into one of history's most enigmatic texts, a work that describes rebel angels teaching humans forbidden knowledge, giants devouring the earth, and cosmic secrets written in the stars themselves. Over the next while, we'll trace the footsteps of European explorers stumbling upon this lost text in Ethiopian monasteries. We'll stand with 200 angels as they swear an oath of rebellion on Mount Hermon's snow-covered peak. We'll witness the birth of the Nephilim, those terrible giants born from the union of heaven and earth, and we'll ascend with Enoch himself through 7 heavens, each more wondrous and terrible than the last. This is not merely an ancient text. It's a window into how our ancestors understood the cosmic order, the origin of evil, and humanity's place in a universe populated by powers beyond comprehension. If you appreciate what I'm sharing, the kindest thing you can do is like and subscribe. These actions fuel my passion to keep going. I'm also endlessly fascinated by our worldwide audience, so drop a comment about your location and local time. As the present fades to whispers, we find ourselves transported to 1773, where Scottish explorer James Bruce stands before the gates of an Ethiopian monastery, the dusty heat of the African highlands, mixing with incense smoke drifting from ancient stone walls, about to rediscover a text that would shake the foundations of biblical scholarship. The Manuscript Hunters. The year is 1773, and James Bruce, Scottish laird turned explorer, has just achieved what most Europeans considered impossible. He has traced the Blue Nile to its source. But here, in the Ethiopian highlands, exhausted from years of travel through territories no European has seen for centuries, Bruce discovers something that will prove far more significant than any geographic achievement. In the monastery of Gondar, monks show him manuscripts written in Ge'ez, the ancient liturgical language of Ethiopian Christianity, and among them are multiple copies of a text Bruce has only heard whispered about in scholarly circles, the Book of Enoch. Bruce can hardly believe what he's seeing. Here, treated as scripture, carefully copied and recopied through generations, sits a book that vanished from the Western world over a millennium ago. The monks handle these manuscripts with casual reverence, the way one might handle a family Bible, unaware that they possess what European scholars have been desperately seeking for centuries. The parchment feels rough beneath Bruce's fingers, made from goat skin, prepared in the same way Ethiopian scribes have been preparing writing surfaces since the 4th century. The ink, deep black and made from burnt wood and tree gum, forms the distinctive curved letters of Ge'ez script, each character a small work of art. What Bruce cannot know, examining these texts by candlelight in the monastery's dim scriptoriums, is that he's looking at the most complete version of one of the most influential non-canonical texts in religious history. The Book of Enoch, also called First Enoch, to distinguish it from later texts attributed to the same figure, exists in its fullest form only here, in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, while fragments would later be discovered in Greek, and portions would be found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Ethiopian version contains all 108 chapters, preserved like an insect in amber through centuries of careful transmission. Bruce acquires 3 manuscripts, an act that requires delicate negotiation and considerable payment. The journey back to Europe takes years, and Bruce guards these texts more carefully than any of his other acquisitions. When he finally returns to Scotland, scholars initially meet his claims with skepticism. Could this really be the lost Book of Enoch, quoted in the New Testament letter of Jude, referenced by early church fathers, then mysteriously absent from the biblical canon? The answer, confirmed through careful translation and comparison with ancient quotations, is yes. Bruce has recovered a text that bridges the gap between the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, a work that profoundly influenced early Jewish and Christian thought about angels, demons, the nature of evil, and the structure of the cosmos itself. But what Bruce has really discovered is a window into an alternative tradition, a path not taken by Orthodox Judaism and Christianity, yet one that left indelible marks on both faiths. Whispers from the seventh generation. To understand the Book of Enoch, we must first understand Enoch himself, a figure who appears in Genesis with tantalizing brevity. In the genealogy from Adam to Noah, most patriarchs received the same formulaic treatment. They lived, they fathered children, they died. But Enoch breaks this pattern dramatically. Genesis 5, verses 21 through 24, tells us that Enoch lived 65 years and fathered Methuselah. After fathering Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Then comes the extraordinary statement, Enoch walked with God, and he was no more, for God took him. This enigmatic passage, so different from the death notices of other patriarchs, sparked centuries of speculation. What does it mean that Enoch walked with God? Where did God take him? The Hebrew phrase translated as walked with God appears only one other time in Genesis, describing Noah's righteousness. But while Noah eventually dies, Enoch simply vanishes, translated to another realm without experiencing death. In a genealogy where lifespans stretch to nearly 1,000 years, Enoch's 365 years seem precisely calculated, matching the days in a solar year, hinting at cosmic significance. Jewish tradition seized upon these mysteries, developing an extensive Enochic literature that transformed this brief biblical mention into an elaborate mythology. Enoch becomes the great scribe of heaven, recording angelic secrets and human deeds. He witnesses the fall of the rebel angels, receives revelations about the coming flood, and ascends through multiple heavens to behold the throne of God. The tradition grows so elaborate that in some texts, Enoch transforms into the angel Metatron, a figure sometimes called the Lesser, YHWH, so exalted that later rabbis worried the tradition bordered on heresy. But why Enoch? Why does this particular patriarch, seventh from Adam, become the recipient of such extraordinary revelations? The number 7 itself carries significance, representing completion and perfection throughout ancient Near Eastern thought. Enoch stands at the perfect generation, the completion of a cycle before the world's corruption necessitates the flood. Moreover, his position in the genealogy places him before the flood, making him a witness to the antediluvian world, that mysterious age when Genesis tells us divine beings, mated with human women and giants, walked the earth. The Book of Enoch elaborates on this timing, presenting Enoch as living during the very period when the cosmic order begins to unravel. He witnesses the descent of the angels called Watchers, sees the birth of the giant Nephilim, and receives visions of the flood that will cleanse the earth. His righteousness stands in stark contrast to the corruption spreading across creation, making him the perfect messenger to record both the causes of divine judgment and the promise of eventual restoration. Ancient readers would have recognized parallels with other traditions. Mesopotamian literature speaks of 7 antediluvian sages who brought divine knowledge to humanity. The 7th of these sages, in some traditions, ascends to heaven and receives divine secrets. The Babylonians told of Enmeduranki, a pre-flood king who was taken into the divine assembly and taught the arts of divination. These parallels suggest that the Enochic tradition taps into deep wells of ancient Near Eastern mythology while reshaping them within a distinctly Jewish theological framework. Yet the Enoch of the apocalyptic tradition becomes something more than just another righteous patriarch. He embodies the possibility of human transformation, of crossing the boundary between earthly and heavenly realms. His story suggests that exceptional righteousness can grant access to divine mysteries, that humans can receive direct revelation of cosmic truths normally hidden from mortal eyes. This idea would profoundly influence Jewish mysticism and early Christianity, where visionary experiences and heavenly ascents become marks of spiritual authority. When Paul speaks of being caught up to the third heaven, when John of Patmos describes his throne vision in Revelation, they follow in Enoch's footsteps, claiming the same kind of boundary-crossing experience that transforms human into revealer of divine mysteries. When heaven watched the daughters of men. You stand on a hillside in the dawn of the world, when the boundary between heaven and earth was gossamer thin, and divine beings moved freely between the realms. The morning mist rises from valleys, where the first cities cluster along riverbanks, smoke from cooking fires, mixing with the golden haze of sunrise. This is the world before the flood, when human lifespans stretched across centuries, and the memory of Eden still lingered in the stories of the oldest inhabitants. Above you, the sky suddenly shimmers with movement that is not cloud or bird, descending through layers of light that hurt to perceive directly. Figures of impossible beauty materialize from the celestial heights. These are the Watchers, the Grigori in Greek, those angels assigned by the Most High to observe humanity's development. Their bodies seem woven from solidified starlight, their faces terrible in their perfection, neither male nor female, yet somehow embodying the essence of both. When they speak among themselves, their voices resonate like struck crystal, creating harmonies that make your bones ache with longing for something you cannot name. But watch their eyes, those orbs of condensed fire that should be fixed on heaven's throne. See how they turn downward, lingering on the human settlements below. In the gardens and courtyards, the daughters of men go about their daily tasks, drawing water, weaving cloth, singing the old songs as they work. They are beautiful in their mortality, their skin kissed by sun, their laughter ringing across the valleys. To human eyes, they are simply women, but to the Watchers, accustomed to the rigid perfections of the celestial realm, they represent something unprecedented, beauty married to change, loveliness that shifts and grows and ages, desire incarnated in flesh that knows both pleasure and pain. You feel the cosmic tension building like the air before a thunderstorm. These Watchers were meant to remain separate, to observe without interfering, to maintain the boundary between the divine and human realms. But desire, that force that moves the spheres and kindles the stars, begins its slow corruption. One by one, the Watchers' gazes linger longer. Their incorporeal forms begin to grow heavy with longing. The perfect harmonies of their conversations grow discordant as they speak of things never before contemplated in the heavenly heights. The moment of decision approaches, like a wave building far out at sea, invisible until it begins to crest. You witness Semyaza, greatest among the Watchers, as he first voices the unthinkable. His words fall into the celestial silence like stones into still water, sending ripples through the very fabric of creation. "Come," he says to his fellows, "let us choose wives from among the daughters of men and father children with them." The suggestion should be impossible, a violation of the fundamental order established at creation's dawn. Yet 200 Watchers step forward, their light already beginning to dim as they contemplate this cosmic transgression. You watch as they descend fully into the material realm, their bodies growing denser, taking on flesh and weight, and all the limitations of physical form. The air around them crackles with residual power, as wings meant for soaring through eternity fold into shapes that can walk upon earth. Their first footsteps leave marks that will never fully fade, patches of ground where even millennia later, nothing will grow quite right. This is the moment that changes everything, when the Watchers become the watched, when angels choose to fall, not from rebellion against the throne, but from desire for the daughters of earth. The 200 who swore upon Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon rises 9,000 feet above the surrounding lands. Its 3 summits crowned with snow even in summer, visible from Damascus to Tyre, from the Galilee to the plains of Bashan. Here, where the mountain's peak pierces the boundary between earth and sky, 200 Watchers gather to seal their fate with an oath that will echo through eternity. The name Hermon itself will come to mean devoted to destruction, forever marked by what transpires on its heights this day. Semyaza stands at the center of the gathered host, his form still radiant but somehow diminished. Like a flame burning lower than before, he knows the magnitude of what they contemplate, understands that there will be no return from this choice. "You will blame me for this great sin," he tells his fellows, his voice carrying across the assembled watchers. The others press closer, their combined light casting strange shadows on the snow, shadows that seem to writhe with their own dark life. "We will all swear an oath," they respond, "and bind ourselves by mutual curses, not to abandon this plan, but to carry it through to completion." The oath they swear is unlike any promise made before in the history of creation. Angels, beings of pure will, aligned with divine purpose, now bind themselves to an act of cosmic rebellion through voluntary limitation. Each speaks their name aloud, and as they do, that name becomes inscribed in the mountain's stone, invisible to mortal eyes, but burning like brands in spiritual sight. Semyaza, Azazel, Kokabel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Daniel, Chazakiel, Barakiel, Asael, Armoros, Batariel, Bezaliel, Ananiel, Zachiel, Shamziel, Satariel, Turiel, Yomiel, Sariel, 200 names in total, each one a star choosing to fall, a note in heaven's harmony deliberately singing discord. The ritual of their oath-taking involves mysteries the text only hints at. They cut covenant in ways that should be impossible for beings of pure spirit, yet somehow they mark themselves, each bearing a sign of their mutual binding that cannot be undone. Some traditions say they mix their essence with the mountain snow, creating a substance neither fully material nor entirely spiritual. Others claim they spoke words in the primordial language that preceded all human tongues, words that rewrote portions of reality itself to accommodate their transgression. What drives them to this irreversible choice? The text suggests multiple motivations beyond mere lust. Azazel, who will become the most infamous among them, seems driven by a desire to share knowledge, to elevate humanity through teaching. Others appear motivated by loneliness, seeking companionship in a cosmos where they exist between the absolute authority of God and the earthbound limitations of humanity. Still others may rebel against their role as mere observers, desiring to become actors in the drama of creation rather than perpetual audience members. But beneath these individual motivations lies a deeper tragedy. The Watchers represent the first beings to choose evil, not from pride or anger, but from desire, introducing into the cosmos a new category of sin. Unlike the tradition of Satan's rebellion, which springs from the desire to usurp God's throne, the Watchers' fall emerges from attraction to creation itself. They do not seek to rule heaven, but to participate in earth. Their sin is not ascension but descent, not grasping for too much but settling for too little. The mountain remembers their presence. Even today, local traditions speak of Mount Hermon as a place where the veil between worlds grows thin. Ancient temples crowned its peaks, each culture that arrived recognizing something significant about this place. The Romans called it the Sacred Mountain. The Canaanites believed their gods assembled here. And deep in limestone caves that dot its slopes, water emerges from springs that feed the Jordan River, as if the mountain itself weeps perpetually for what was chosen on its heights. Forbidden arts and secret knowledge. In the valley below Mount Hermon, in a settlement whose name has been swallowed by time, a woman named Istahar watches the stranger approach her father's forge. The man calling himself Azazel stands taller than any human she has known, his movements carrying an odd grace, as if he has not quite learned how flesh and bone properly move together. His eyes hold depths that make her feel as though she's falling, and when he speaks, his voice resonates in frequencies that make metal sing in response. "I can teach your people wonders," Azazel tells the gathered craftsmen, and his hands move over crude bronze tools with gestures that seem to reshape reality itself. Under his instruction, the smiths learn to recognize new ores, stones that hold within them metals unknown to human craft. He shows them how to build furnaces that burn hotter than any fire they've known, temperatures that can separate silver from lead, that can alloy copper with tin, in proportions that create bronze harder than stone. The secret of iron, that metal which will reshape human civilization, flows from his lips like honey and poison mixed. But metallurgy is only the beginning. To the women, Azazel teaches the art of antimony, showing them how to line their eyes with darkness that makes them gleam like stars. He reveals the properties of roots and herbs that can alter consciousness, bring visions, heal wounds, or deal death with a single drop. The movement of celestial bodies becomes comprehensible under his tutelage, as humans learn to read the future in the conjunction of planets, to understand that earthly events mirror heavenly motions in patterns that repeat through endless cycles. Other watchers bring their own terrible gifts. Barachiel teaches the signs of lightning, how to read the will of storms, and predict where skyfire will strike. Kokabel reveals the constellation's secret names and the power contained in knowing the true designation of each star. Tamiel shares the mysteries of astronomy, but not the pure science humans might have discovered on their own, rather the dark knowledge of how celestial movements can be manipulated, how drawing down stellar influences can alter earthly fate. Shamsiel teaches the signs of the sun, including rituals that should never be performed during eclipses, when the boundary between dimensions grows dangerously permeable. The knowledge spreads like wildfire through human settlements. Within a generation, technologies that should have taken millennia to develop appear simultaneously across the ancient world. Cities rise with walls of fitted stone that require no mortar. Weapons appear that can pierce any armor, and armor that can turn any weapon, beginning an arms race that will never end. Women paint their faces in patterns that carry meaning beyond mere decoration, each symbol a word in a language that predicts and influences future events. Humanity advances, but it is an advancement built on foundations they do not understand, using principles they cannot derive, wielding powers whose ultimate cost remains hidden. What the Watchers do not teach, or perhaps what humans fail to understand, is that all knowledge comes with a price. The metals they learn to work carry more than physical properties. They hold resonances that attract certain influences, create vulnerabilities in the spiritual defenses that once protected human communities. The cosmetics and herbs open perception to realms better left unseen. The astronomical knowledge reveals humanity's cosmic insignificance in ways that drive some mad with despair. Each secret shared breaks down another barrier between the human and non-human worlds, until the boundaries become so blurred that chaos inevitably follows. Giants, walking the ancient earth. The children born from the union of watchers and human women emerge wrong from their first breath. Where normal infants measure perhaps 20 inches at birth, these hybrid offspring stretch to 3 times that length, their mothers dying in agony as they bring forth beings never meant to exist. They grow with terrifying speed, reaching the height of trees while still children, their appetites expanding proportionally with their frames. The text calls them Nephilim, the fallen ones, and also Gibborim, mighty ones, names that capture both their degraded nature and terrible power. These giants inherit the worst aspects of both parents, the supernatural strength of their angelic fathers, combined with the ungoverned appetites of physical flesh. They consume not just food but resources at a rate that strips entire regions bare. A single Nephilim requires the daily food supply of an entire village. When grain runs short, they turn to livestock. When livestock are exhausted, darker appetites emerge. The Book of Enoch records with stark horror how the giants turned against humanity to devour them, introducing cannibalism as a practice that will haunt human consciousness forever after. But physical consumption represents only part of their violation of natural order. The Nephilim exist as living breaches in reality, their very presence warping the fabric of creation around them. Plants grow twisted in their footsteps. Animals flee regions where they dwell, instinctively recognizing wrongness that transcends normal predation. Weather patterns distort around their settlements, as if nature itself recoils from their existence. They are described as 3,000 ells in height, a measurement that places them at nearly a mile tall, though whether this represents physical or metaphysical stature remains deliberately ambiguous. The giants developed their own horrific culture, teaching humanity practices that even the Watchers never intended. They introduce systematic warfare, not the tribal skirmishes humans had known, but organized campaigns of conquest and extermination. They establish the practice of blood drinking, claiming it grants them their father's immortality. Most disturbingly, they begin breeding programs, attempting to create even more powerful offspring through carefully selected human pairings, treating humanity like livestock to be improved through selective breeding. Some giants achieve individual infamy that echoes through legend. Oya and Hahia, twin giants of exceptional power, wage war against each other in conflicts that level mountains. Mawe, described as having voice that can shatter stone, becomes a prophet of destruction, revealing cosmic secrets that should never have reached human ears. These names appear not just in Enochic literature, but scattered through the mythology of cultures worldwide, suggesting either common origin or experiences too traumatic to forget. The earth itself begins to rebel against their presence. The Book of Enoch describes how the earth made accusation against the giants, a phrase that suggests the planet as conscious entity, recognizing violation of its fundamental nature. Springs dry up, rather than provide water for them. Crops fail in their proximity. The ground sometimes opens to swallow them, though their supernatural nature allows them to climb back from chasms that would trap any normal being. Creation wages subtle war against creatures that should never have existed. Yet for all their monstrosity, the giants remain partially human, capable of emotions beyond mere appetite. The text hints at their awareness of their own wrongness, their understanding that they exist as cosmic mistakes. Some seek death, but discover they've inherited enough of their father's nature to be nearly impossible to kill. Others rage against heaven and earth equally, cursing both the divine realm that spawned their fathers and the material world that gave them form. They become embodiments of existential horror, conscious of their own abomination, yet unable to transcend or escape it. The memory of the Nephilim haunts human consciousness long after their physical destruction in the flood. Every culture preserves legends of giants who once walked the earth, from the Greek Titans to the Norse Jotnar, from the Hindu Asuras to the Native American Wendigo. These beings represent humanity's deep fear of forces beyond natural scale, of appetites that cannot be satisfied, of power without wisdom or restraint. Dreams of coming destruction. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the boundary between sleeping and waking grows thin, Noah tosses on his bed of woven reeds, his mind filled with visions that feel more real than the solid walls around him. He sees water, endless water, rising from beneath and falling from above until the distinction between sea and sky dissolves into a single drowning embrace. In these dreams, inherited from his great-grandfather Enoch's prophecies, he witnesses the last moments of the antediluvian world. The dreams always begin the same way, clouds gathering on every horizon simultaneously, moving with unnatural purpose toward a central point directly above. These are not normal storm clouds, but something older, darker, carrying within them the weight of divine judgment made manifest. As they converge, the daylight fails not into normal darkness, but into a twilight of deep purple and brown, colours that exist nowhere in nature, shades that speak of cosmic wrongness requiring cosmic correction. The air grows thick, difficult to breathe, as if the atmosphere itself recoils from what must come. Then the earth begins to crack, not along natural fault lines, but in patterns that suggest intention, design, judgment carved into the planet's flesh. From these fissures, water emerges, but this is not groundwater or underground streams. This is the Tehom, the deep that existed before creation, the primordial waters that God separated on the second day, now returning to reclaim their original dominion. The water rises black and cold, older than light, carrying within it the memory of chaos before the first divine word brought order. Noah watches in his dreams as the giants attempt to escape their fate. They climb the highest mountains, their massive hands carving holds in sheer cliff faces, but the water rises faster than they can climb. Some try to build towers of hastily piled stones, but the rain falls with such force that it dissolves mortar, undermines foundations, reduces their constructions to rubble. Others attempt to use the forbidden knowledge their fathers taught, inscribing symbols of power that once could reshape reality, but the symbols wash away like chalk drawings in rain. The cosmos itself has turned against them, revoking the very powers that allowed their existence. The human cities fare no better, though their destruction carries different emotional weight. Noah sees mothers lifting children above their heads as water rises, holding them high until their strength fails. He watches farmers who spent lifetimes cultivating orchards stand helplessly as trees older than memory disappear beneath the surface. Libraries of carved tablets, repositories of all human knowledge accumulated since Eden, dissolve into mud. The dreams force him to witness not just death, but the erasure of entire civilizations, languages that will never be spoken again, songs that will never be sung, stories that will die with their last teller. Yet within the dreams comes also instruction, whispered in a voice that bypasses his ears and speaks directly to his soul. Measurements appear in his mind, precise dimensions for a vessel, unlike any ship humans have constructed. The plans include chambers for animals, ventilation systems for air circulation, storage for food that must last an indefinite period. Most mysteriously, the instructions include space for writings, for preserving not just physical life but knowledge, memory, the testimonies of what was, and warnings of what must never be again. These dreams, Noah understands, are both burden and gift. They prepare him for the unimaginable task ahead, while slowly severing his emotional connections to the dying world. Each vision makes him slightly less human, slightly more instrument of divine will. By the time the real reigns begin, he will have already watched the world end 1,000 times in sleep, will have become numb to apocalypse through repetition. The dreams are mercy, disguised as torment, allowing him to function when everyone else collapses in horror. The scribe of heaven. The transformation of Enoch from man to celestial scribe occurs not in a single moment, but through a series of elevations, each one stripping away another layer of mortality until only the essential recording consciousness remains. The watchers have fallen, the giants ravage the earth, and heaven requires a witness who can document these cosmic crimes with perfect accuracy, someone who exists between the divine and human realms, capable of understanding both yet bound to neither. The calling begins with a voice that Enoch hears not through his ears, but through his bones, a vibration that resonates at the frequency of truth itself. Enoch, scribe of righteousness, the voice intones, and with those words, his human identity begins its slow dissolution. He finds he can no longer forget anything he sees or hears. Every moment inscribes itself perfectly in his consciousness. His eyes begin to perceive beyond the normal spectrum, seeing the spiritual architecture, underlying physical reality. Words appear in his mind in languages he has never learned, complete with understanding of their meaning and proper use. The physical act of writing transforms under this calling. When Enoch takes up stylus and tablet, his hand moves according to divinely inspired knowledge, recording truths his human mind cannot fully comprehend. The marks he makes carry more than meaning. They bear weight, substance, creating records that exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions. What he writes on earthly materials appears simultaneously in heavenly books, creating an unbreakable connection between the human record and divine testimony. His scribal work becomes a form of cosmic documentation, creating evidence that will stand at the final judgment. As scribe of heaven, Enoch must record without editorial discretion, capturing horror and beauty with equal precision. He documents the Watcher's teachings to humanity, preserving both the beneficial knowledge and the corrupting secrets. He transcribes the cries of the earth against the giants, each accusation recorded in painful detail. He writes the names of every human killed by the Nephilim, creating a memorial that heaven will not forget. Most difficult, he must record the Watcher's prayers for forgiveness, their recognition of sin coming too late to prevent consequences, their children's pleas for mercy that cannot be granted. The roll grants Enoch access to heavenly archives, vast repositories of knowledge, where everything that has been and will be exists in written form. Here he reads the books of life and death, sees names appearing and disappearing as souls enter and leave existence. He studies the tablets of destiny, though certain sections remain sealed, even from his elevated sight. He learns that creation itself follows a written plan, reality unfolding according to texts authored before the foundation of the world. Though whether these texts determine events or merely predict them remains ambiguous even to his expanded understanding. But the greatest burden of his role comes from understanding the true nature of recording. Every word he writes becomes fixed in reality, unchangeable, eternal. He cannot soften harsh truths or emphasize mercy over judgment. He must capture the full horror of the pre-flood world, while knowing his account will survive the deluge, becoming testimony for all future generations. His writings will inspire and terrify, guide and mislead, comfort and condemn, all depending on who reads them and how they choose to understand. The responsibility of shaping humanity's understanding of these cosmic events weighs on him more heavily than mountains. Through this process, Enoch gradually ceases to be human in any conventional sense. His body becomes translucent, then transparent, then barely visible at all, existing more as organizing principle than physical form. He no longer needs food or sleep. Sustained entirely by the act of witnessing and recording, emotions fade into distant memories, replaced by perfect clarity of perception. He becomes the universe's memory, the consciousness that ensures nothing significant is lost or forgotten, even as the flood approaches to wash away the physical evidence of the antediluvian world. Ascending beyond the veil. The air grows thin and strange as Enoch's ascension begins, reality bending like heated glass around his transforming form. Colours appear that have no names in human language, shades between shades that exist only in the spaces where dimensions meet. The solid earth beneath his feet becomes suggestion, then memory, then nothing at all as he rises through layers of existence that normally remain forever hidden from mortal perception. Sound changes first. The ordinary noises of earth, wind in trees, distant water, animal calls, fading into a silence so complete it has its own presence. Then new sounds emerge, harmonics that bypass the ear entirely, resonating directly in consciousness. These are the songs of creation itself, the frequencies at which atoms dance, planets spin, galaxies rotate in their stately spirals. Each note contains information, history, purpose, revealing how sound preceded light in creation's sequence, how divine speech vibrates still in every particle of existence. The sensation of ascending feels like dissolving and condensing simultaneously. Parts of Enoch that he never knew existed begin to wake, while aspects he considered essential fade into irrelevance. His human memories remain but grow distant, like childhood recollections viewed from extreme old age. New memories emerge, not of events he has lived, but of truths he has always known without knowing. He remembers the silence before the first word, the darkness before the first light, the void that was not empty, but pregnant with infinite possibility. Between earth and the first heaven, Enoch passes through a realm of clouds that are not clouds, moisture that is not water. Here dwell the spirits of weather, beings that shepherd storms and gentle rains alike, maintaining the balance between drought and flood. They acknowledge his passage with gestures that create aurora, light without source, dancing in patterns that spell out blessings in alphabets of pure radiance. Their forms shift constantly, never quite solid, never entirely dispersed, existing in the perpetual state of becoming that defines all liminal beings. The boundary of the first heaven approaches, like a wall of crystallized light, solid yet permeable, absolute yet yielding to those with permission to pass. As Enoch touches this barrier, he feels judgment, not harsh but thorough, every action and thought of his earthly existence, evaluated in an instant that stretches to eternity. The barrier reads his essence like a book, determining his worthiness not through moral calculation but through recognition knowing him as one marked for this journey before the foundations of the world were laid. Passing through transforms the last of his human substance into something finer, more essential. His body, if it can still be called that, becomes an architecture of light and intention, held together not by flesh and bone, but by purpose and will. He maintains form only because formlessness would render him unable to perceive and record what he must witness. He exists now as living testimony, a consciousness shaped entirely by its function, as witness to wonders and terrors beyond human comprehension. The first heaven opens before him like a flower of impossible dimensions, each petal a different reality, each reality containing infinite depth. Time moves differently here, flowing backward and forward simultaneously, allowing Enoch to perceive events in their eternal aspect rather than their temporal sequence. He sees the fall of the Watchers not as past event, but as perpetual present, continuously occurring and continuously judged. He witnesses the flood both as future certainty and ancient memory, understanding finally how prophecy and history are merely different perspectives on the same eternal truth. Through 7 heavens rising. The architecture of heaven unfolds in layers that defy three-dimensional understanding, each realm separated from the next, not by distance but by states of being, frequencies of existence that require fundamental transformation to traverse. Enoch, now more consciousness than flesh, rises through these levels guided by Uriel, whose name means fire of God, an angel whose form shifts between pillar of flame and something almost human, never quite settling into either state. The first heaven spreads around them like an ocean of crystallized air, where the treasuries of snow and hail wait in vast storehouses that exist outside temperature, neither frozen nor melting, but held in potential until Earth requires their release. Here Enoch witnesses the preparation of every raindrop, each one individually crafted and assigned its destination, its moment of falling, its purpose in the grand design. The angels who govern weather move through this space with deliberate grace, consulting texts written in condensation on surfaces of polished ice, adjusting the balance of moisture and drought according to patterns too complex for human mathematics to describe. Look and record. Uriel instructs, and Enoch's consciousness expands to perceive the machinery of meteorology from its divine perspective. He sees how each storm contains moral weight, how weather patterns reflect spiritual realities playing out in the human realm below. The great winds have names and personalities, ancient beings that predate the physical atmosphere they now inhabit. The angel of the north wind appears as a figure wrapped in aurora, breathing cold that preserves and destroys in equal measure. The southern wind's angel burns with desert heat, carrying within its essence the memory of every sandstorm since creation. The second heaven rises before them, like a wall of darkness visible, a paradox that should not exist yet does. Here dwell the imprisoned angels, not the watchers who fell to earth, but those who rebelled in different ways, refusing their assigned functions, or abandoning their posts in the celestial hierarchy. They exist in chains of crystallized regret, their forms dimmed to shadow, their voices reduced to whispers that speak only of what they have lost. Enoch must record their names and crimes, creating a catalogue of heavenly failure that serves as warning to all celestial beings about the consequences of abandoning divine purpose. Through a doorway that appears only when approached at the correct angle of intention, they enter the third heaven, and here paradox reaches its apex. This heaven contains both paradise and torment, Eden preserved and hell anticipated, existing side by side yet never touching. In one direction stretches the garden prepared for the righteous, where trees bear fruit that satisfies hunger before it is felt, where water flows upward in fountains that sing hymns in languages that predate words. The light here heals merely by touching it, and the air itself carries sustenance that makes earthly food seem like shadows of nourishment. But turn, and the same heaven contains the place of torment, prepared for those who work evil, though it remains empty, waiting for the judgment that has been decreed but not yet executed. The instruments of punishment exist in potential, terrible devices that will exact perfect justice without mercy, each one precisely calibrated to match the sins it will address. Enoch sees wheels of fire that burn without consuming, chains that bind the soul rather than the body, mirrors that force the wicked to perceive themselves as they truly are, a torture greater than any physical pain. The angels who will operate these instruments stand ready but motionless, their faces expressing neither eagerness nor reluctance, only patient certainty. The fourth heaven operates on different principles entirely, structured not by space, but by time. Here the sun and moon follow their courses, not the physical bodies visible from Earth, but their spiritual essences, the intelligences that govern their movements. Enoch watches the changing of celestial guard as solar and lunar angels exchange dominion, a ceremony that occurs simultaneously every sunset and sunrise, yet also exists as a single eternal moment. The stars gather here in their true forms, each one a conscious being of condensed light and purpose, singing harmonies that maintain the universe's structural integrity. When stars fall from their courses, as some will during the tribulations to come, it is from this heaven they depart, leaving gaps in the celestial chorus that create dissonance throughout creation. In the fifth heaven, Enoch encounters the Grigori, the watchers who did not fall, who maintain their vigil despite witnessing their brother's descent. They exist in a state of perpetual mourning, their light dimmed not by sin but by sorrow, grieving for their fallen companions while maintaining their posts with absolute dedication. These beings are giants of spirit, their forms stretching between dimensions, simultaneously present in heaven while observing earth. They do not speak to Enoch, but their silence communicates more than words, expressing a grief too vast for language, a loyalty that persists, despite breaking their hearts with each moment of continued service. The sixth heaven houses the 7 archangels who govern creation's fundamental forces. Here Michael tends to the scales of justice that weigh every action in the universe, adding and subtracting from cosmic balance with movements so subtle they might be mistaken for stillness. Gabriel stands at a threshold between realms, 1 foot in heaven, 1 in the realm of dreams, serving as messenger between states of consciousness. Raphael works at tasks of healing that extend beyond individual bodies to encompass the repair of reality itself, where it has been damaged by sin and rebellion. Each archangel exists as both individual and office, personality, and function united in beings that embody their purposes so completely that to see them is to understand aspects of God's own nature. The boundary of the 7th heaven approaches not as a place, but as a transformation. To enter here, even the refined substance of Enoch's celestial body must undergo further purification. Uriel cannot follow. This realm exceeds even an archangel's authority to traverse freely. Enoch must continue alone, though alone loses meaning in a space where all consciousness converges toward unity. The entrance requires passing through fire that burns away everything except essential truth, water that drowns all illusion, wind that scatters any remaining attachment to individual identity, and earth that grounds the consciousness in eternal reality rather than temporal existence. The architecture of paradise. You stand at the threshold of the 7th heaven, your consciousness now refined to its absolute essence, and before you stretches the celestial temple, the true sanctuary of which the earthly tabernacle was merely a shadow cast into lower dimensions. Your perception, expanded beyond human limitation, takes in architecture that exists in more than 3 dimensions, walls that curve through time as well as space, pillars that support not ceilings but entire planes of existence. The floor beneath you, if floor it can be called, consists of condensed worship, millions of prayers crystallized into a surface that reflects not your image, but your true nature, showing you yourself as heaven sees you. Each step you take resonates through the structure, your movement becoming part of an eternal dance that all beings perform simply by existing in this space. The sound of your footfalls, for sound still exists here though, in forms unknown to earthly ears, harmonizes with frequencies that maintain the cosmos, your simple act of walking, contributing to the music that prevents reality from dissolving back into primordial chaos. Above you, the ceiling opens into infinities, within infinities, each level revealing greater mysteries, while concealing still more behind veils of light, too pure for even your enhanced perception to penetrate. You glimpse the mechanisms of providence, wheels within wheels that Ezekiel will one day strain to describe, vast intelligences that appear mechanical, yet live with purpose beyond biological life. These wheels turn according to patterns that encode destiny itself, their movements determining the rise and fall of nations, the birth and death of stars, the precise moment each leaf falls from every tree that has ever grown or ever will grow. The walls pulse with living text, words that write and rewrite themselves continuously, telling all stories simultaneously. You watch your own life scroll past in languages you both do and don't understand, seeing how your individual existence weaves into patterns, stretching back to Adam and forward to the end of days. Other lives intertwine with yours, billions of narratives, creating a tapestry that reveals history not as sequence but as symphony, each life a note that must sound at exactly its appointed time for the music to achieve its intended effect. Moving deeper into the temple, you encounter the altar of incense, where angelic priests offer not animal sacrifice, but distilled essence of experience, transforming joy and sorrow, triumph and defeat, into fragrances that please, or disturb, the divine presence. You understand now why certain human actions are called sweet savour to the Lord, while others stink in heaven's nostrils. Every deed releases spiritual aromatics that rise to this place, contributing to an olfactory record of creation's moral history. The Holy of Holies exists at the temple's heart, though heart implies centrality in only 3 dimensions. While this sacred space occupies the center of all possible dimensions simultaneously. You cannot enter, few can, but you can perceive its entrance, a doorway that is also a being, a threshold that evaluates all who approach with judgment that occurs outside time, knowing their entire existence from beginning to end in the instant they draw near. Beyond that living door burns light that is not light, but the source from which light learned how to shine, darkness that is not darkness, but the mystery from which all knowledge emerges. Here in this uppermost sanctuary, you witness the throne room's outer chambers, where seraphim burn without being consumed, their 6 wings, not truly wings, but states of being, covering feet that have never walked, faces that express without features, flying through stillness that contains all motion. Their cry of "Holy, holy, holy" creates, rather than describes holiness. Each repetition adding another layer of sanctification to existence, building reality's sacred architecture through proclamation that never began and will never end. Names written in starlight. The angelic hierarchies reveal themselves to Enoch not as mere organizational structure, but as living architecture of divine will, each order of beings fulfilling functions that maintain reality's coherence. In the 7th heaven's vast expanse, he observes the seraphim, whose name means burning ones, creatures of pure love, whose existence is continuous combustion, destroying and creating themselves moment by moment in flames of absolute devotion. They possess 6 wings, not for flight, but for modulation of their overwhelming presence. 2 wings cover what might be called faces, but are really apertures of perception that would destroy any lesser being who looked upon them directly. 2 cover their feet, extremities that touch the fundament of existence itself, and 2 maintain their position in the divine presence through movements that appear as flight, but are actually calibrations of proximity to the throne. Below them in hierarchy, but not in space, for heavenly geography operates on principles other than physical distance, stand the cherubim, whose forms challenge comprehension. Each bears 4 faces: human, lion, ox, and eagle, not arranged around a head, but existing simultaneously in the same space, each face perceiving different aspects of reality. The human face reads moral dimensions, the lion perceives power and authority, the ox understands service and sacrifice, while the eagle sees the connections between all things, the patterns that unite disparate events into divine purpose. Their wings interconnect, creating a canopy of consciousness that serves as heaven's living intelligence network, each cherub aware of what all others know, yet maintaining individual identity within collective awareness. The Ophanim, the wheels Ezekiel glimpsed, exist as beings of pure motion, circular entities covered with eyes that see not light but significance, observing the weight and meaning of every action throughout creation. They rotate in patterns that encode divine will into the fabric of space-time, their movements determining the trajectories of everything from subatomic particles to galactic clusters. When they align in certain configurations, prophecies activate, miracles become possible, and the rigid laws of physics temporarily yield to higher authorities. The dominions carry within themselves the blueprints of authority itself, beings who exist to establish and maintain proper order throughout all hierarchies, both heavenly and earthly. Every legitimate government, every functional family structure, every successful organization unknowingly patterns itself after templates these angels maintain. When human authorities corrupt their power, they create distortions in the patterns dominions guard, requiring interventions that manifest as revolutions, reformations, or simple quiet changes that redirect history's flow back toward its intended course. Powers, despite their name suggesting force, function primarily as barriers, the angels who maintain the boundaries between dimensions, preventing unauthorized crossings that would damage reality's integrity. They stand guard at every point where different planes of existence touch, allowing proper passage while blocking incursions that would introduce chaos. The Watchers who fell had to overcome or corrupt members of this order to achieve their descent, a violation that created wounds in the cosmic structure that still have not fully healed. Virtues bestow grace, not as reward but as necessary energy that enables beings to transcend their natural limitations. Every moment of unexpected strength, every instance of courage beyond character, every act of love that exceeds human capacity draws from reservoirs these angels maintain. They appear to Enoch as flowing streams of liquid light, constantly in motion, distributing divine enablement according to patterns too complex for even his expanded consciousness to fully track. The principalities govern the intersection of spiritual and material realms, particularly focusing on nations, cultures, and large human groupings. Each nation has its appointed principality, an angel whose character influences that people's distinctive traits, their strengths and weaknesses, their role in history's unfolding. These beings convene in councils that determine the rise and fall of empires. Though their decisions must align with higher purposes, they themselves don't fully comprehend. Archangels, despite their name suggesting highest authority, serve as heaven's civil servants, the angels most directly involved in executing divine will in practical ways. They carry messages, lead armies, pronounce judgments, and perform the countless tasks that translate infinite intention into finite action. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, and others whose names remain hidden form this order's core, though their number extends beyond what human mathematics can count. Finally, the ordinary angels, if any heavenly being can be called ordinary, comprise the majority of heaven's population, countless beings of light and purpose, who sing, serve, and maintain the continuous worship that sustains creation's existence. Their individual names, each one unique and encoding their specific purpose, would take eternity to recite, yet each is known perfectly, loved individually, and valued as essential to the cosmic harmony. The prison of fallen stars. In the depths beneath the fifth heaven, in dimensions that exist as inversions of normal space, Enoch discovers the prison prepared for the rebel watchers. Though most still walk free upon the earth, the angel Raguel, whose name means friend of God, serves as warden of this terrible place, his friendship with the divine requiring him to oversee the imprisonment of those who were once his brothers in service. The prison itself defies description in terms of physical architecture. It exists as crystallized consequence, walls made from the materialized weight of sins committed, bars forged from broken oaths, chains crafted from the tears of those the Watcher's actions destroyed. The cells, if cells they can be called, are tailored individually to each prisoner, designed not for crude physical torment, but for perfect spiritual consequence. Each imprisoned Watcher experiences their punishment as education, forced to understand completely the ramifications of their choices through direct experience of every pain their actions caused. Here dwells Semyaza, leader of the rebellion, though his imprisonment has not yet begun in linear time. Enoch sees him as he will be, wrapped in chains of frozen fire, suspended in a void that contains nothing but his own reflected guilt, multiplied infinitely. The chains burn with cold that penetrates beyond flesh, to freeze the very essence of being, yet never numb, never allowing the mercy of unconsciousness. Around him orbit the consequences of his leadership, visible manifestations of every Watcher who fell because they followed him, every giant born from their unions, every human killed by their offspring. He must witness continuously the full flowering of the evil tree he planted with his desire. Azazel occupies a unique torment, buried beneath sharp stones in a place called Dudael, though this location exists simultaneously in the physical desert and in this spiritual prison. His punishment reflects his crime of teaching forbidden knowledge. He experiences all the weapons he taught humans to make as they are used throughout history. Every blade that pierces flesh, every arrow that finds its mark, every bullet that will be fired in wars not yet imagined, Azazel feels them all, understanding through direct experience the magnitude of violence he introduced to the world. The cosmetics he taught women to make burn his eyes with the vanity they inspired, the pride they fed, the deceptions they enabled. The prison contains empty cells, thousands upon thousands, waiting for their future occupants. Some bear names Enoch recognizes, Watchers still free on earth. Others show designations he doesn't understand, suggesting that rebellion against divine order will not end with the Watchers, that other beings in ages to come will choose similar paths and face similar consequences. The construction of new cells continues, even as he watches, heaven's foreknowledge preparing accommodations for sins not yet committed, rebels not yet fallen, choices not yet made, but already seen in the eternal perspective that transcends time. Tablets of destiny. In a chamber of the sixth heaven that exists in profound silence, where even the constant hymns of angelic choirs cannot penetrate, Enoch encounters the tablets of destiny, documents that should not be readable by any consciousness below the divine, yet somehow reveal themselves partially to his transformed perception. These tablets, carved from substances that predate matter, inscribed with tools that exist outside causality, contain not predictions but certainties, not possibilities but actualities, that simply have not yet manifested in temporal dimensions. The tablets float without support, each one rotating slowly to display text that writes itself continuously, updating as free will makes choices that were always known but never predetermined, a paradox that would shatter human logic but makes perfect sense in heavenly understanding. Some tablets glow with soft golden light, recording blessed events, moments of grace, salvation achieved, love fulfilled. Others burn with darker radiance, documenting tragedies necessary for greater purposes, suffering that serves teaching, deaths that enable new life. Enoch reads fragments, all his transformed consciousness can bear. He sees the flood's exact date, predetermined, yet dependent on human wickedness, reaching its precise saturation point. He observes the rise and fall of kingdoms that don't yet exist, their entire histories condensed into symbols that contain millennia of human experience. Most disturbing, he finds his own destiny tablet, seeing his transformation into Metatron, spelled out in language that predates speech, understanding that his entire existence has been preparation for a role that transcends humanity while serving it eternally. The tablets reveal that destiny operates not as rigid predetermination, but as river flowing toward inevitable ocean, allowing countless meandering paths, while ensuring ultimate arrival. Individual choices matter immensely, determining not whether God's will manifests, but how it manifests. Not the destination, but the journey's character. Free will exists genuinely within divine sovereignty, another paradox that heaven considers elementary truth, while human philosophy will debate it forever, without resolution. The Valley of Decision. Between the sixth and seventh heavens, in a space that exists more as moral dimension than physical location, spreads the Valley of Decision, also called the Valley of Jehoshaphat, in texts that will be written centuries after Enoch's time. This place serves not as location for future judgment, but as present reality, where every choice made throughout creation immediately manifests its moral weight, creating topographies of righteousness and wickedness that angels navigate when executing divine justice. The valley appears infinite, yet intimate, vast enough to contain every decision ever made, yet focused enough that each choice receives individual attention. Mountains rise from accumulated acts of selfless love, their peaks disappearing into light too pure to perceive directly. Canyons plunge from patterns of cruelty, their depths revealing the full horror of evil chosen despite knowledge of good. Between these extremes spread plains of moral mediocrity, the countless small compromises and minor virtues that comprise most human existence, neither damning nor saving, but simply existing as testimony to lives lived without exceptional evil or good. Enoch watches as new features constantly form in this moral landscape. A child's decision to share food with someone hungrier creates a small hill that might grow into mountain if the pattern continues. A merchant's choice to cheat customers carves a depression that could become canyon if unchecked by repentance. Most fascinating and terrible, he observes how individual choices connect, creating moral watersheds, where one person's decision influences countless others, sometimes across centuries. A teacher who chooses patience over anger creates a river of positive influence, flowing through generations of students who will themselves become teachers. A parent who chooses violence creates a cascade of trauma that will require divine intervention to redirect toward healing. The valley contains what angels call pivot points, locations where single decisions altered history's entire trajectory. Here stands the spot where Abraham chose faith over logic, trusting divine promise despite physical impossibility, a choice that created a mountain from which three religions would eventually flow. There lies the depression, where Cain chose murder over mastery of sin, introducing violence that would replicate through every generation. Enoch sees his own pivot point, the moment he chose to walk with God rather than merely exist, a decision that seemed small at the time, but created the possibility for his current celestial journey. Most sobering, the valley reveals how few truly significant choices most beings make. The majority of existence consists of following patterns established by others, living out consequences of ancient decisions, rarely exercising the free will that defines human nature. Yet when those rare moments of genuine choice arrive, they reshape the valley's entire topography, creating new possibilities for every subsequent decision. The angels who work here, reading the valley's features like maps, understanding where intervention might redirect harmful patterns or amplify beneficial ones, treat each decision with respect, regardless of its apparent magnitude, knowing that any choice might become a pivot point visible only in retrospect. Weather in the valley reflects moral climate, storms gathering over regions of concentrated evil, gentle rains falling where righteousness accumulates. Lightning strikes at moments of divine judgment, not punishment, but illumination, revealing clearly the nature of choices made in moral darkness. The winds carry sounds, not voices but essences of decisions, the joy of generosity, the anguish of betrayal, the satisfaction of integrity maintained despite cost. These sounds combine into something like music, though calling it music diminishes its complexity, a composition that angels study to understand the moral state of creation at any given moment. Rivers run through the valley, formed from accumulated tears, both of sorrow and joy. The river of repentance flows uphill, defying natural law as forgiveness defies justice, carrying away the debris of wrong choices, though the landscape they carved remains as reminder and instruction. The river of consequences flows in all directions simultaneously, connecting every choice to its results regardless of temporal or spatial distance. Where these rivers meet, pools of mercy form, offering respite from the valley's harsh revelations, places where angels bring souls to understand their choices without being destroyed by full knowledge of their implications. Leviathan, stirring in the depths. Beneath all heavens, in dimensions that exist as inversions of everything above, Enoch glimpses the dwelling places of chaos, monsters that God subdued but did not destroy at creation's founding. Here writhes Leviathan, the serpent whose coils could encircle existence itself, whose scales each contain an abyss, whose eyes burn with the unlight that preceded the first divine command for illumination. This creature embodies not evil, for evil requires choice, but chaos, the primordial resistance to order that makes creation an ongoing act rather than a completed achievement. Leviathan sleeps, mostly, its consciousness dispersed through ocean depths, both physical and spiritual, dreaming dreams that manifest as whirlpools, tidal waves, and the restless anxiety that humans feel when standing at the ocean's edge. But periodically it stirs, and when it does, order throughout creation trembles. Governments fall without explanation, natural laws briefly suspend, and humans experience moments of vertigo where nothing seems solid or certain. The Watcher's rebellion has agitated it, their violation of cosmic boundaries, creating vibrations that penetrate even to these profound depths. The creature's form defies stable perception, constantly shifting between snake and dragon, fish and indefinable monster. Its mouth contains teeth like mountains, each one inscribed with words in the pre-creation language that spoke chaos before God spoke order. When it breathes, which thankfully happens rarely, its exhalations create what humans experience as existential dread, the sudden awareness of meaninglessness that can strike even the most faithful. Its inhalations draw in prayers and songs of worship, attempting to swallow the sounds that maintain creation's stability, though it never succeeds in consuming enough to achieve its goal of returning everything to primordial void. Around Leviathan swim lesser chaos creatures, beings that have no names because naming requires order they inherently reject. These entities feed on confusion, growing stronger whenever humans lose clarity of purpose, whenever moral boundaries blur, whenever the distinction between good and evil becomes ambiguous. The Nephilim's existence particularly nourishes them, these impossible hybrids, representing exactly the kind of category violation that chaos celebrates. Some of these creatures will escape during the flood, riding the waters meant to cleanse the earth, ensuring that chaos remains a possibility, even in the renewed world. Calendar, written in stars. You stand in the fourth heavens observatory, a space that exists as pure perception where the movements of celestial bodies reveal themselves not as mechanical rotations, but as choreographed dance encoding time's very structure. Your consciousness, expanded beyond human limitation, comprehends simultaneously the physical stars visible from Earth and their spiritual correlates, understanding finally how astronomy and astrology were once unified wisdom before corruption separated science from meaning. The angel Uriel serves as your instructor, his form shifting between geometric patterns that mirror planetary orbits and something almost resembling human shape. He directs your attention to the sun's path, not the simple ellipse humans will eventually discover, but a spiral through dimensions, each revolution adding layers of significance to time's passage. You observe how the solar year consists of exactly 364 days in heaven's reckoning, a perfect number divisible by 7, creating 52 weeks of absolute regularity. The extra day humans count exists outside sacred time, a margin of error introduced by sin's distortion of creation's original precision. Above you wheel the stars in patterns that spell out destinies, though reading them requires understanding that surpasses human capacity. Each constellation tells multiple stories simultaneously, historical events that have occurred, prophecies awaiting fulfillment, and eternal truths that transcend temporal manifestation. Orion, which some call the Giant, remembers the Nephilim, while predicting the mighty hunter Nimrod, while embodying the eternal principle of strength, corrupted by pride. The Pleiades, 7 sisters, encode perfection's number while mourning one sister's dimming, paralleling the watcher's fall from their complete number. The moon's phases reveal themselves as more than reflected light waxing and waning. Each phase opens different possibilities in the spiritual realm. Windows when certain prayers penetrate more easily, when particular types of divine intervention become possible. The new moon creates openings for new beginnings, not through superstition, but through actual structural changes in reality's fabric. The full moon amplifies existing patterns, making both good and evil more potent, explaining why humans throughout history will associate it with madness and transformation. Your enhanced perception grasps the mathematical precision underlying these movements. Every planetary conjunction encodes messages, not determining human fate, but announcing opportunities, warnings, invitations to participate in cosmic purposes. The planets themselves possess awareness, not consciousness as humans understand it, but purpose-driven intelligence that maintains their courses while allowing variations that communicate meaning. When Mars approaches Earth, war doesn't become inevitable but more possible, requiring greater human wisdom to maintain peace. When Venus aligns with Jupiter, love and justice temporarily harmonize, creating moments when mercy becomes easier to choose. Uriel shows you the calendar's deeper purpose, synchronizing heavenly and earthly worship. When humans honor Sabbaths and festivals at their appointed times, their celebrations align with angelic liturgies, creating harmonies that strengthen creation's structure. The festivals encode history and prophecy simultaneously. Passover remembers Exodus from Egypt, while anticipating ultimate liberation from death itself. The Day of Atonement acknowledges present sin, while pointing toward final reconciliation. Each appointed time exists as intersection between temporal and eternal, allowing humans to participate momentarily in heaven's timeless worship. You witness how the Watcher's fall has begun disrupting these patterns. Their teachings about the stars, while containing truth, lack the moral framework that makes astronomical knowledge safe. Humans learn to predict eclipses, but not to understand their spiritual significance. They map constellation movements, but miss the messages encoded in their dance. This separation of mechanism from meaning will plague humanity throughout history, creating a science that explains how, but never why, a mysticism that claims why without understanding how. The Son of Man vision. In the highest accessible region of the seventh heaven, where even Enoch's transformed consciousness strains to maintain coherence, he receives the vision that will echo through centuries, shaping messianic expectation and providing language for ultimate hope. The Ancient of Days manifests not as being but as presence, existence so fundamental that everything else seems derivative, shadow cast by incomprehensible light. The throne, if throne it can be called, exists as condensed authority, every legitimate command ever given or that will be given emanating from this source. Before this presence that predates age, that invented time itself, approaches a figure that should not exist, one like a son of man, bearing human form in dimensions where humanity has no natural place. This figure moves through the heavenly court with authority that makes angels bow, yet maintains something essentially human in its bearing, a bridge between the divine perfection surrounding it and the flawed creation it apparently represents. The contradiction creates tension that vibrates through every level of existence, harmony, and discord simultaneously, resolution and mystery combined. The Son of Man receives dominion, glory, and kingdom, not through conquest but through recognition, as if all creation suddenly remembers its true sovereign. Every nation, language, and people group throughout history, including those not yet born, those whose cultures will develop on continents still unknown, bend before this authority that combines judgment with mercy, power with compassion, transcendence with immanence. The figure speaks, and its words reshape reality, not through force, but through truth so fundamental that existence reorganizes itself to accommodate it. Enoch perceives this figure's face, though face inadequately describes what he sees. It contains every human face that has been or will be, yet remains singular. The eyes hold depths that have witnessed every sorrow, every joy, every choice made in hidden darkness or proclaimed in brightest day. The expression communicates simultaneously perfect understanding and perfect mystery, complete knowledge paired with questions that will never be answered, because they constitute existence itself. When the figure looks at Enoch, he feels known absolutely yet not consumed by that knowledge, accepted in his imperfection, while being called to transformation. The Son of Man bears wounds that haven't yet been inflicted, scars from events that won't occur for centuries, marks of suffering that exists eternally in heaven's perspective, while awaiting temporal manifestation. These wounds glow with light, more brilliant than the figure's unwounded flesh, suggesting that suffering voluntarily embraced for others' sake creates the greatest beauty in divine economy. Blood that hasn't yet been shed already pleads for mercy, already purchases redemption, already bridges the gap between perfect justice and necessary forgiveness. Around this figure gather souls not yet born, humans who will exist throughout history, all somehow present in this eternal moment. They sing a song Enoch has never heard yet recognizes, a melody that predates creation, yet will only be fully voiced at time's culmination. The lyrics speak of victory through defeat, life through death, exaltation through humiliation, paradoxes that resolve in the Son of Man's person. Each soul sings its unique part, yet all harmonize perfectly, suggesting that human individuality and cosmic unity need not conflict when properly ordered through this mysterious figure. The vision reveals the Son of Man as judge, seated on a throne that exists in every courtroom throughout history simultaneously. Every verdict ever rendered, every justice sought, every mercy granted flows from this source. Yet the judgment dispensed differs from human understanding of justice. It sees not just actions but motivations, not just choices but circumstances, not just sins but the wounds that prompted them. The judgment heals while condemning, restores while punishing, makes all things new while acknowledging all things that were. Most mysteriously, Enoch perceives that this Son of Man exists simultaneously in heaven's throne room and somewhere else, somewhere lower, somewhere that feels like Earth yet isn't Earth as it currently exists. The figure maintains presence in multiple dimensions, fully divine in the heavenly realm, while somehow becoming fully human in another sphere. This multiplication of presence without division of essence breaks every rule of logic, yet heaven accepts it as fundamental truth, the cornerstone of reality that makes all other existence possible. The vision culminates in transformation. The Son of Man touches Enoch, and in that touch, he understands that everything he has witnessed, all the revelations about angels and judgment, about cosmic structure and divine purpose, centers on this figure. The Watchers fell because they couldn't accept serving a creation that would produce this Son of Man. The flood comes because humanity must be preserved to create the lineage through which he will emerge. Every prophecy points toward, every sacrifice anticipates, every hope reaches for this ultimate marriage of human and divine that repairs the breach the Watchers created while accomplishing purposes that predate their fall. Metatron's transformation. The moment arrives without warning, though heaven has anticipated it since before time's invention. Enoch feels his already transformed consciousness to begin another change, deeper and more fundamental than his elevation to celestial scribe. His human origin starts to dissolve, not destroyed but transcended, incorporated into something that exceeds humanity while preserving its essence. He is becoming Metatron, the angel who was once man, bridge between the earthly and divine that will persist until time ends. The transformation begins with fire, though calling it fire diminishes its nature. This is the same consuming presence that will speak from burning bushes, that will descend on Sinai, that will fill temples with glory too intense for priests to endure. It burns away not sins, already forgiven, but limitations, the boundaries that define human consciousness as separate from divine awareness. Each layer of limitation that burns reveals capabilities Enoch never knew existed, ways of perceiving and understanding that human language cannot encode. His form expands beyond any stable shape, becoming geometry that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. He possesses faces numbering beyond counting, each one perceiving different aspects of reality, yet maintaining unified consciousness. His height stretches from earth to heaven's throne, though he also remains small enough to whisper in human ears. This paradox of scale reflects his unique nature, greatest among angels, yet servant of all, possessing authority second only to the divine, yet exercising it purely through mediation and message-bearing. Paths of lightning, roads of thunder. The meteorological mysteries reveal themselves to Enoch in chambers where weather originates before manifesting in physical skies. Here he observes the storehouses of wind, vast halls where breezes wait in ranked order, each one labelled with its destination, its appointed time, its intended effect. The angels who manage these repositories work with precision that exceeds human comprehension, calculating how each gust will interact with every leaf, every grain of sand, every drop of water it encounters, ensuring that chaos never emerges from their collective motion. Lightning exists here not as electrical discharge, but as messages written in light's most violent form. Each bolt carries information from heaven to earth, most of it incomprehensible to human perception, received only by the deeper layers of creation that remember their divine origin. Thunder follows as creation's response, the physical universe acknowledging receipt of heaven's communication. The delay between lightning and thunder that humans will measure represents the time required for material reality to process spiritual information, to translate infinite meaning into finite response. The pathways these forces follow appear as roads, visible only to celestial perception, highways of probability along which weather travels from potential to actual. These roads intersect at nodes where divine intervention becomes possible, where prayers can redirect storms, where righteousness can bring rain to drought-stricken lands, where wickedness can summon disasters that seem natural but carry moral weight. The Watcher's corruption has damaged many of these pathways, creating the violent and unpredictable weather patterns that will plague Earth throughout history. Enoch watches the preparation of the Great Flood's rains, a meteorological event that requires coordination beyond anything creation has previously experienced. Every water molecule that will fall must be gathered, charged with purpose, directed toward its role in the coming destruction and renewal. The angels working at this task show neither joy nor sorrow, only absolute focus on precision that will ensure the flood accomplishes exactly what divine justice requires. No more, no less. They prepare not just rain, but the breaking of the fountains of the great deep, releasing waters trapped beneath Earth's surface since creation's second day. The chambers contain weather patterns for ages not yet come, storms that will mark significant moments throughout history. Enoch sees the darkness that will cover Egypt during the plagues, the earthquake that will split temple veils, the star that will guide wise men. Each meteorological event waits in potential, perfectly planned, yet somehow dependent on human choices that haven't been made, another paradox of providence that angels accept without question, while human theology will debate endlessly. Snow and hail occupy special vaults, each crystal individually crafted to be unique, encoding messages in frozen water that only the most sensitive souls perceive. The angels reveal that snow serves as heaven's gentle correction, covering ugliness with beauty, forcing rest through impassibility, teaching about transformation through its cycle of fall, accumulation, and melt. Hail represents sharper judgment, frozen rain that wounds to warn, destroys crops to prevent worse destructions, speaks in impacts that cannot be ignored. The winds receive particular attention as they serve as heaven's breath in creation, carrying not just physical particles, but spiritual influences. The east wind brings new beginnings, which explains why it will part the Red Sea, opening paths where none existed. The west wind carries endings, removing what has served its purpose, like the locusts it will blow from Egypt. The north wind preserves, its cold preventing decay, maintaining things until their appointed time. The south wind transforms, its heat enabling changes that gentler temperatures cannot achieve. The Book of Parables. Hidden in the seventh heaven's library, beyond texts accessible to ordinary angels, Enoch discovers the Book of Parables, words spoken in metaphor that contain truths too powerful for direct statement. These parables exist not as simple moral teachings, but as compressed reality. Each story a seed that will grow differently in each consciousness that receives it, producing understanding calibrated to the reader's capacity, while maintaining meanings that exceed any single interpretation. The first parable speaks of water that remembers its source, while forgetting its destination, flowing always toward union it cannot define. This water divides into countless drops, each believing itself separate, experiencing isolation as reality, while remaining fundamentally connected through the cycle that lifts vapor to cloud, cloud to rain, rain to stream, stream to ocean, ocean to vapor again. The parable encodes truths about consciousness, about the divine presence dispersed through creation while remaining unified, about individual existence within cosmic unity. Another parable describes fire that burns without fuel, consuming nothing while transforming everything it touches. This fire spreads not through contact, but through recognition, each substance discovering its own inflammability when exposed to flames that reveal rather than destroy. The narrative speaks to truth's operation in consciousness, how divine revelation ignites understanding that was always present but dormant, waiting for the spark that makes it blaze, with meaning that generates light without generating ash. The parables multiply beyond counting, each one a gateway to infinite interpretation. A tree grows downward, its roots reaching towards sky, while branches burrow into earth, bearing fruit that satisfies hunger not yet felt, casting shadows that illuminate rather than darken. A river flows uphill when no one watches, returning to its source by paths that violate physics while obeying deeper laws. A seed contains forests of trees that will never grow, yet their potential existence shapes present reality through possibilities that remain forever latent, yet forever influential. When angels wept, you find yourself standing among the heavenly host at the moment when the full magnitude of the Watcher's rebellion becomes undeniable, when the consequences cascade through creation, like dominoes falling in dimensions you can barely perceive. The angels around you, beings of light and purpose who have existed since creation's first moment, begin to emit sounds you've never heard before, frequencies that register not as music, but as pure emotion given voice. These are tears without water, sorrow without the physical mechanisms humans require for grief. The angels' forms flicker and dim, their usual radiance replaced by something like twilight, as if joy itself has become impossible in the face of what their brothers have done. You feel their anguish as pressure in spaces you didn't know you possessed, chambers of consciousness that only open in the presence of cosmic tragedy. Michael stands at heaven's ramparts, his warrior nature trembling with the need to act, while divine command holds him in check, waiting for the precise moment when intervention becomes permitted. His tears fall as sparks that will become meteors, streaking across Earth's sky as testimony to heaven's grief. Each spark carries within it the memory of fellowship broken, of brothers in arms who chose desire over duty, of bonds severed that had existed since before matter learned to coalesce into form. Gabriel, messenger of mysteries, weeps words in languages that won't exist for millennia, prophecies of sorrow that will only become comprehensible when human hearts break in ways that echo this celestial grief. The angels' tears encode themselves into reality's fabric, ensuring that every generation will carry within its collective unconscious the knowledge that beings of light can fall. That choice extends even to heaven's heights, that free will costs more than anyone imagines when they first receive it. You witness Raphael, the healer, attempting to repair wounds that haven't yet fully formed, preparing remedies for damages that will cascade through generations. This angel's tears carry medicine for traumas not yet inflicted, healing that must wait centuries to find the wounds it was created to address. The preparation of these future healings causes its own kind of anguish, knowing the cure while watching the disease spread, possessing the remedy while being forbidden to apply it until the illness runs its appointed course. Echoes of Eden, lost. The garden exists still in the third heaven, preserved in perfection like a flower pressed between pages of eternal memory, and as Enoch passes through its outskirts, he hears echoes of what was and what might have been. The trees here grow as they were meant to, their fruit containing not just nourishment but knowledge perfectly balanced with wisdom, power matched with responsibility. The tree of life stands at the center, its branches reaching through dimensions, simultaneously present in heaven while removed from earth, waiting for the day when humanity will prove ready for its gift. The atmosphere itself carries memories, the first words spoken between human and divine, conversations that required no mediation, no prophet, no priest, just direct communion between creator and created. These echoes replay endlessly but quietly, whispers of intimacy lost but not forgotten, promises that seemed broken but wait for ultimate fulfillment. The animals here remember names Adam gave them, their true names that encoded their essences, that granted humanity authority through understanding rather than force. Light here needs no source, emanating from existence itself, from the harmony between all things that makes external illumination redundant. This light casts no shadows because nothing here opposes it. Nothing blocks or resists its gentle radiance. Colours exist here, that earth lost when the garden closed, hues that human eyes can no longer perceive, but that the soul remembers, aching for beauty it cannot name. The perfection preserved here judges not through condemnation, but through contrast, showing by its existence what was lost, what was chosen away, what might yet be restored. The Ethiopian guardians. In the mountain monasteries of Ethiopia, where clouds drift through doorways and eagles nest in bell towers, the Book of Enoch found sanctuary when the rest of Christendom cast it into darkness. Here, in a land that traces its biblical connections back to Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, monks have preserved Enoch's visions with the same devotion they show to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, ancient beyond Western memory, never participated in the councils that declared Enoch apocryphal, never accepted the boundaries that Roman and Byzantine authorities drew around acceptable scripture. The story of this preservation begins in Aksum, the great trading empire that dominated the Horn of Africa when Rome still stood strong. In the 4th century, when King Ezana converted to Christianity, Syrian missionaries arrived carrying texts in Greek and Aramaic, including complete copies of Enoch that had already vanished from most Christian libraries. These missionaries, fleeing persecution in their own lands, brought with them an older form of Christianity, one that hadn't yet learned to fear the cosmic visions and angelic hierarchies that Enoch described. They found in Ethiopia a people whose ancient traditions already spoke of supernatural beings intervening in human affairs, of hidden knowledge preserved in sacred texts, of the thin boundaries between the earthly and divine. The translation into Ge'ez, Ethiopia's liturgical language, occurred sometime in the 5th or 6th century, though the exact date dissolves into the mists of tradition. What matters is that Ethiopian scribes didn't simply translate. They preserved, protected, and propagated. In scriptoriums lit by butter lamps, working with parchment made from goat skin and ink mixed from charcoal and acacia gum, generations of monks copied Enoch's words with the same care they devoted to the Psalms. Each manuscript became a work of art, illuminated with geometric patterns that echo the mathematical precision of Enoch's astronomical visions, bordered with angelic figures whose eyes seem to watch from the page. The monasteries that housed these manuscripts rose in locations that seemed chosen to mirror Enoch's own ascension. Debre Damo, accessible only by rope up a sheer cliff face, where manuscripts were hauled up in leather bags, while monks prayed for divine protection of the sacred words. Lalibela, with its churches carved directly from volcanic rock, creating spaces that exist neither fully above nor below ground, architectural paradoxes that reflect the liminal nature of Enoch's revelations. These locations weren't just storage facilities, but living libraries where monks memorized entire sections, chanted passages during night vigils, and incorporated Enoch's visions into their understanding of cosmic order. The Ethiopian Church developed unique traditions around Enoch that appear nowhere else in Christianity. They celebrate his feast day on the 12th of Hamle, commemorating not his birth or death, but his transformation, his crossing from human to angel. In their liturgy, Enoch stands alongside Moses and Elijah as one who entered heaven without dying, a precedent that makes resurrection less impossible, ascension less incredible. Ethiopian Christian art depicts him with both pen and wings, scribe and angel simultaneously, capturing the dual nature that Western Christianity found too paradoxical to embrace. When Islamic armies swept across North Africa, converting or conquering ancient Christian kingdoms, Ethiopia held firm, protected by mountains and distance, but also by something less tangible, a sense of divine appointment as guardians of traditions the wider world had forgotten. The monks understood themselves as preserving not just texts but testimonies, not just words but witnesses to realities that most of Christianity had decided were too strange, too challenging, too expansive for ordinary faith. They maintained Enoch not in spite of its strangeness, but because of it, recognizing in its cosmic scope and angelic rebellions truths that tamer scriptures couldn't contain. Through centuries of isolation, while Europe forgot that Enoch existed beyond brief mentions in Jude, Ethiopian monks continued their careful preservation. They developed elaborate protocols for copying, requiring ritual purification before handling the texts, prayers before beginning each section, fasting during particularly sacred passages. Errors in transcription were considered not just mistakes, but sins, requiring confession and penance. This spiritual approach to manuscript preservation meant that when James Bruce finally arrived in 1773, he found not corrupted fragments but complete texts, preserved with accuracy that modern scholarship has confirmed through comparison with ancient fragments. The manuscripts themselves tell stories beyond their words. Analysis of the parchment reveals periods of scarcity when monks used every available surface, writing in margins, between lines, creating palimpsests, where Enoch overlays even older texts. During times of war, manuscripts show evidence of hasty burial, earth stains, and water damage, testifying to periods when preserving the texts required hiding them from invaders who wouldn't understand their value. Some manuscripts bear scorch marks from fires that destroyed churches, but somehow spared the texts, miraculous preservations that monks interpreted as divine confirmation of their guardianship. The Ethiopian tradition also preserved interpretive frameworks lost elsewhere, understanding of Enoch that early Jewish and Christian communities possessed, but later generations forgot. They maintain knowledge of the calendar systems Enoch describes, the solar year of 364 days that differs from both lunar and Julian calculations. They preserved understanding of the geographical references, knowing which mountains and valleys Enoch's visions located, maintaining maps of sacred geography that connected earthly locations to celestial realities. Most importantly, they kept alive the expectation that Enoch's prophecies remained relevant, that the cycles of judgment and redemption he described continue to unfold. Shadows in the Qumran caves. The Bedouin boy Muhammad Edaid Dib threw the stone into the cave to frighten out any animals that might be hiding within, but the sound that echoed back wasn't the scurry of feet or flutter of wings. It was the distinctive crack of breaking pottery, a sound that would eventually reshape understanding of ancient Judaism and early Christianity. The year was 1947, and in that cave near the Dead Sea, preserved by the desert's extraordinary dryness, waited manuscripts that had been hidden for 2,000 years, including fragments of Enoch in its original Aramaic. The Qumran community, those mysterious Essenes who separated themselves from Jerusalem's temple corruption, had gathered texts they considered essential for understanding the approaching end times. Among their collection, Enoch featured prominently, with multiple copies suggesting it held special significance for these apocalyptic devotees. The fragments found in the caves confirmed what scholars had suspected but couldn't prove. The Ethiopian version faithfully preserved authentic ancient traditions, vindicated after centuries of dismissal as late fabrication. Cave 4 yielded the richest treasury, fragments from at least 11 different Enoch manuscripts, more copies than most biblical books. The Aramaic text, written in the same language Jesus spoke, revealed layers of meaning lost in translation. Phrases that seemed obscure in Greek or Ge'ez suddenly clarified when read in their original linguistic context. The astronomical sections, dismissed by some scholars as confused or corrupted, proved to describe actual, celestial observations with remarkable accuracy when the Aramaic technical terms were properly understood. But the Qumran discoveries revealed more than just textual accuracy. They showed that Enoch wasn't marginal but central to certain strands of Second Temple Judaism. The community's own compositions quoted Enoch as authoritative scripture, building their understanding of coming judgment on foundations laid by the ancient sages' visions. Their belief in cosmic warfare between light and darkness, their emphasis on angelic beings both good and evil, their expectation of messianic deliverance, all drew heavily from Enochic traditions that mainstream Judaism had already begun to suppress. The cave's shadows had preserved more than parchment. They had maintained evidence of religious diversity that official histories had overwritten. The same darkness that hid these texts from those who would have destroyed them also protected proof that ancient Judaism wasn't monolithic, that multiple understandings of cosmic order competed for acceptance, that the boundaries between canonical and apocryphal were once fluid and contested, rather than fixed and obvious. Lost in translation, words dissolve and reshape as they pass between languages, each translation a transformation that preserves meaning while altering essence. The Book of Enoch travelled from its original Aramaic through Greek interpretation to Ge'ez preservation, each linguistic transition adding layers while potentially obscuring originals. In the spaces between languages, in the gaps where one tongue fails to map perfectly onto another, mysteries multiply and meanings shift like sand dunes reshaped by wind. The Aramaic original spoke in earthy metaphors drawn from pastoral life, using terms for spiritual realities that emerged from daily experience of sheep and goats, sowing and harvesting, walking and falling. When Greek translators rendered these concepts, they brought philosophical precision that Aramaic never attempted, creating technical theological vocabulary from what had been visceral imagery. The Greek mind demanded logical consistency, where the Semitic imagination embraced paradox, required systematic explanation, where the original offered experiential truth. Consider the word watcher, which in Aramaic is ear, meaning wakeful one, carrying connotations of sleepless, vigilance, of eyes that never close, of consciousness that never dims. Greek rendered this as egregoros, emphasizing the watching aspect, but losing the sense of perpetual wakefulness that made these beings terrifying in their primus. Relentlessness. Ge'ez added its own coloration, using terms that connected these beings to indigenous Ethiopian concepts of guardian spirits, creating unexpected resonances with African traditional cosmology. The astronomical passages suffered particular violence in translation, technical terms for celestial phenomena, forced through linguistic filters that lacked equivalent concepts. Aramaic's precise vocabulary for different qualities of light, developed by desert peoples who navigated by stars, compressed into Greek's simpler luminosity terms. Mathematical relationships, expressed through Semitic number symbolism, became confused when Greek translators applied their own numerological systems. By the time these passages reached Ge'ez, they had become poetic rather than scientific, mystical rather than mathematical. Yet translation also revealed hidden dimensions, aspects of the text that only became visible when refracted through different linguistic prisms. Greek's capacity for abstract thought drew out philosophical implications barely suggested in Aramaic's concrete imagery. Ge'ez's musical qualities, the way its syllables flow in chanted recitation, uncovered rhythmic patterns that pointed to oral traditions predating written records. Each language illuminated different facets of truth, like turning a crystal to catch light from various angles. Early Christians and forbidden books. The relationship between early Christianity and the Book of Enoch resembles a passionate romance that gradually cooled into embarrassed denial. In the first centuries after Christ, Christian writers embraced Enoch enthusiastically, finding in its visions of the Son of Man prophecies of Jesus, in its fallen angels explanations for evil's existence, in its detailed afterlife geography, maps for understanding resurrection. The letter of Jude quotes Enoch directly as prophecy, while Revelation's imagery draws deeply from Enochic wells, angels and judgments, and cosmic battles flowing from the same visionary source. Tertullian, writing in the 2nd century from North Africa, defended Enoch's authenticity with fierce rhetoric, arguing that if the book was good enough for the apostles, it should be good enough for the church. He pointed out that Enoch's preservation through the flood proved divine approval, reasoning that Noah must have carried the texts in the ark, maintaining the antediluvian prophets' testimony for post-flood humanity. His arguments reveal how seriously early Christians took Enoch, considering it not peripheral, but foundational to understanding cosmic history. But as Christianity evolved from persecuted sect to imperial religion, Enoch's wild visions became problematic. The detailed angel hierarchies competed with emerging church hierarchies for authority. The book's assumption that cosmic knowledge could come through direct revelation rather than ecclesiastical mediation threatened institutional control. Most disturbing, Enoch's portrayal of multiple heavens and complex afterlife geography complicated the simpler heaven-hell binary that proved more effective for moral instruction and social control. The councils that established biblical canon found Enoch too hot to handle. Its description of angels mating with women raised uncomfortable questions about the nature of spiritual beings. Its detailed astronomy and calendar systems conflicted with the Roman calendar the Church had adopted. Its apocalyptic fervour, appropriate for persecuted minorities, expecting imminent divine intervention, seemed dangerous for an established church invested in temporal stability. By the 4th century, influential theologians, like Augustine, were arguing that the sons of God in Genesis meant Seth's lineage, not angels, effectively undermining Enoch's entire narrative framework. Jerome, translating scripture into Latin Vulgate that would define Western Christianity for a millennium, excluded Enoch decisively. He acknowledged its ancient heritage and apostolic quotation but declared it non-canonical, too strange for inclusion in scripture, meant to instruct ordinary believers. His decision rippled through Western Christianity, transforming Enoch from scripture to curiosity, from revelation to speculation. Within generations, most European Christians forgot Enoch existed, except as a name in genealogies and a fragment in Jude. Eastern Christianity maintained slightly more openness, with Byzantine scholars preserving Greek fragments and Slavonic communities developing their own Enochic traditions. But even there, the text occupied liminal space, neither fully rejected nor completely accepted, consulted by mystics and scholars while excluded from liturgical reading. The book that once explained everything became something that needed explaining away, an embarrassment from Christianity's enthusiastic youth that mature orthodoxy preferred to forget. The suppression succeeded so thoroughly that by the medieval period, European scholars debated whether the Book of Enoch had ever existed or was merely legend, a phantom text referenced by ancients, but never actually written. When rumours reached the west of complete manuscripts in Ethiopia, many dismissed them as obvious forgeries, unable to believe that such a significant text could survive in Africa while vanishing from Europe. The rediscovery required not just finding manuscripts, but overcoming centuries of conditioned skepticism. Walking through Aksum's ancient streets. You walk through Aksum's dusty streets as the sun sets behind the ancient stelae, those impossible obelisks that rise like fingers pointing toward heaven, and the air itself seems thick with accumulated centuries of prayer and preservation. Your feet follow paths worn by countless pilgrims, Ethiopian Christians who travelled here not just to visit a historic site, but to touch the living heart of their tradition, where the ark supposedly rests, and where monks have guarded sacred texts through invasions, famines, and forgetting. The sound of chanting drifts from the Church of St. Mary of Zion, voices rising and falling in Ge'ez, cadences that haven't changed since the language ceased to be spoken anywhere but in liturgy. The words they sing come partially from Enoch, woven seamlessly into prayers that treat his visions as present reality rather than ancient history. You hear the names of angels invoked for protection, the geography of heaven mapped in melodic phrases, the promise of judgment and redemption repeated like a heartbeat that has pulsed through Ethiopian Christianity for 1500 years. In the monastery's scriptorium, elderly monks bend over parchments, their fingers stained with ink made from recipes passed down through generations. They copy Enoch's words with the same devotion their predecessors showed, maintaining the tradition, even though printing presses exist, even though digital copies would be easier. For them, the act of copying is worship, each stroke of the pen a prayer, each completed page an offering. The manuscripts they create will outlast computer files, will survive power failures, and technological obsolescence, will endure as physical testimony to truths too important for merely digital preservation. The smell of incense mingles with the musty scent of ancient parchment, frankincense and myrrh burning in censers, while manuscripts release the aroma of centuries. Your fingers, if permitted, would feel parchment worn smooth by countless readings, edges darkened by the oils of innumerable hands, pages that have been turned so often they've memorized their own movement. These texts aren't museum pieces but living documents, consulted for guidance, read during festivals, quoted in sermons that assume congregations understand Enochic references. Young novices sit in corners, memorizing passages under the guidance of senior monks who correct not just words but pronunciation, ensuring that the oral tradition parallels the written, that if every manuscript vanished tomorrow, the text would survive in living memory. Their voices blend in harmonious recitation, creating soundscapes that transport you beyond the physical moment into something eternal, something that connects this dusty Ethiopian afternoon to Enoch's original visions, to every generation that has preserved and transmitted these words. You realize, standing in these ancient streets, that preservation isn't passive but active, not just maintaining texts but keeping them alive through continuous engagement. The Ethiopian guardians didn't just store Enoch in libraries, but incorporated it into lived faith, made it part of their spiritual DNA, ensured its survival not through hiding but through use. The Slavonic mysteries. In the monasteries of medieval Russia and the Balkans, a different Enoch emerged from the shadows, a second book attributed to the same antediluvian prophet, but containing visions absent from the Ethiopian text. This Slavonic Enoch, also called Second Enoch, or the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, presented familiar themes through an unfamiliar lens, as if the same cosmic truth had been refracted through a different cultural prism, revealing colours invisible in other spectrums. The text appeared in Old Church Slavonic manuscripts, dating from the 14th century onward, though scholars debate whether it represents ancient traditions translated from Greek or medieval compositions, incorporating older fragments. The Slavonic Enoch describes the prophet's ascension through 10 heavens rather than 7, each level revealing different aspects of divine justice and cosmic structure. The additional heavens don't contradict the Ethiopian version, but expand it, like discovering new rooms in a house you thought you knew completely. In this version, Enoch encounters angels unknown to other traditions, a Doyle, from whose body God creates light, and a Rukaz, from whom emerges darkness. These beings embody primal forces that predate creation's visible elements, suggesting theological sophistication that challenges assumptions about medieval Slavic Christianity being derivative or simplistic. The text presents creation occurring through divine thought, becoming substance, word becoming matter through processes that anticipate modern physics' understanding of energy and matter's interchangeability. The Slavonic tradition adds intimate details absent elsewhere. Enoch receives books written by God's own hand, texts that burn with letters of fire that only he can read without being consumed. He learns that before creating the visible universe, God existed alone in invisible light, contemplating creation for eternities, before speaking the first creative word. This God is more philosophical than the Ethiopian Enoch's sovereign judge, more concerned with explaining than commanding, as if divine justice requires divine transparency. Most intriguingly, the Slavonic Enoch contains moral teachings that seem directed at medieval Christian society rather than ancient Jewish audiences. Instructions about honest business practices, warnings against judicial corruption, and emphasis on caring for orphans and widows address concerns of medieval urban life. Either these passages represent later interpolations, or ancient wisdom proved remarkably applicable to different historical contexts, suggesting that certain moral truths transcend temporal specificity. Russian Orthodox mystics found in Slavonic Enoch resources for understanding theosis, the transformation of humans into divine likeness that Eastern Christianity emphasizes more than Western traditions. Enoch's transformation into Metatron, alongside the example of Christ himself, became a prototype for human deification, demonstrating that the boundary between human and divine, mortal and eternal, was more permeable than Western theology typically admitted. This reading influenced hesychast practices, meditation techniques aimed at achieving divine vision through internal stillness. Newton's secret obsession. In the quiet of his Cambridge study, surrounded by prisms and mathematical proofs, Isaac Newton pursued calculations that had nothing to do with gravity or optics. The greatest scientific mind of his age spent decades secretly studying the Book of Enoch, convinced that its astronomical passages encoded truths about the universe's structure that contemporary science had yet to discover. His private papers, hidden until the 20th century, reveal an obsession with Enochic chronology and cosmology that would have shocked his Enlightenment contemporaries. Newton believed that ancient peoples possessed sophisticated knowledge later lost, that Enoch's visions represented actual observations of cosmic mechanics, described in symbolic language. He attempted to reconcile Enoch's 364-day calendar with astronomical observations, developing complex theories about changes in Earth's rotation that might explain the discrepancy. His calculations filled thousands of pages, mathematical genius applied to mystical texts, seeking the unified theory that would harmonize scripture and science. The physicist who discovered that white light contained all colors found in Enoch's descriptions of heavenly lights, confirmation of his theories about light's composite nature. The mathematician who invented calculus to describe planetary motion saw in Enoch's accounts of angelic movements through heavens mathematical principles expressed in narrative form. He wasn't trying to reduce mystery to mechanism, but to discover the mathematical language in which God had written both scripture and nature. Newton's Enochic studies influenced his published work in ways his contemporaries never suspected. His concept of absolute space and time, the fixed framework within which motion occurs, drew partially from Enoch's visions of stable heavens through which celestial bodies move. His belief that gravity operated instantly across infinite distances reflected Enochic descriptions of divine commands, immediately affecting all creation. The founder of modern physics was secretly guided by ancient apocalyptic visions. Fragments of ancient wisdom is less than #0. 5# is greater than. Throughout history, pieces of Enochic tradition have surfaced in unexpected places. Fragments of ancient wisdom, preserved in quotations, allusions, and memories scattered across cultures like seeds, waiting for proper conditions to germinate. Byzantine chroniclers preserved passages in historical works, providing context for understanding biblical narratives. Islamic texts referred to Idris, identified with Enoch, as the inventor of writing and astronomy, maintaining parallel traditions about the antediluvian prophet's cosmic knowledge. Medieval alchemists found in Enoch's transformation metaphors for their own work, the possibility of human substance achieving angelic properties through proper purification. Kabbalistic texts elaborated on Metatron traditions, developing complex hierarchies of divine emanation that drew from Enochic angelology, while extending beyond it. These scattered preservations suggest that even when the complete text disappeared, its ideas continued circulating, influencing thought patterns and spiritual expectations. The fragments often preserve aspects of Enoch that complete manuscripts miss, focusing attention on particular passages that resonated with specific communities. Gnostic groups emphasized the secret knowledge aspects, the revelation of hidden truths to select initiates. Hermetic traditions focused on the astronomical teachings, the mathematical relationships between heavenly and earthly phenomena. Each fragment reflects the concerns of its preservers while maintaining connection to the original vision's cosmic scope. Is less than #0, 5# is greater than. In Irish manuscripts, surprisingly, Enochic traditions appear in glosses and marginalia, suggesting that Celtic Christianity maintained independent channels of transmission. Armenian texts preserve Enochic material in historical chronicles, treating the Watcher's fall as actual history requiring documentation. These dispersed fragments created an underground stream of Enochic influence, flowing beneath Orthodox Christianity's surface, occasionally emerging in mystical movements and apocalyptic expectations. Modern seekers, ancient questions. In universities and seminaries around the world, scholars armed with spectrometers and satellite imagery study texts that monks once copied by candlelight, seeking in ancient visions answers to questions that refuse to age. The discovery of additional Dead Sea Scroll fragments continues, each piece potentially revolutionizing understanding of Enoch's origins and influence. Digital humanities projects create databases comparing every surviving manuscript, tracking variations that might reveal transmission patterns or theological developments. Modern physicists find in Enoch's multiple heavens the anticipation of multiverse theories, parallel dimensions existing simultaneously but separately. Psychologists study the visionary experiences described, comparing them to altered consciousness states induced by meditation, sensory deprivation, or neurological conditions. Anthropologists trace Enochic influences through cultures worldwide, finding fallen angel traditions in societies that supposedly never encountered Jewish or Christian texts. Contemporary religious communities grapple with Enoch's challenges differently than their ancestors. Some New Age movements embrace the text's cosmic scope while ignoring its judgment themes. Certain fundamentalist groups find in Enoch confirmation of conspiracy theories about genetic manipulation and coming catastrophes. Academic theologians debate whether Enoch's exclusion from canon was historical accident or divine providence, whether recovering these texts enriches or complicates faith. The questions Enoch raises remain disturbingly current. What boundaries should exist between human and transhuman? How does advancing technology relate to the forbidden knowledge the Watchers taught? Do genetic engineering and artificial intelligence represent contemporary versions of the violations that prompted the flood? Modern seekers find in ancient texts not historical curiosities but immediate challenges, prophecies that might be predictions or warnings, visions that might be memories or previews. Digital preservation ensures Enoch will never again disappear, but multiplication of copies doesn't guarantee understanding. The text remains as mysterious as when Bruce first encountered it in Ethiopian monasteries, its visions still exceeding interpretation, its implications still disturbing comfortable orthodoxies. Stars still watching. Above you now, in this present moment, as you drift toward sleep, the same stars that witnessed Enoch's ascension maintain their eternal vigil. They have seen empires rise and fall, watched the Watchers descend and the flood waters recede, observed every generation struggle to understand forces beyond human comprehension. Their light, taking years or centuries to reach your eyes, carries messages written before you were born, prophecies fulfilled before you knew to watch for them, promises that outlast the mountains and seas. The constellations wheel in patterns Enoch mapped, following courses he traced through visions that exceeded his vocabulary to describe. Orion still binds the Pleiades with invisible chains of gravity. The Bear still circles the pole star that serves as heaven's anchor in the spinning sky. Each star maintains its appointed position while moving in choreographed progression, the dance continuing, whether humans observe or ignore, whether they understand or misinterpret, whether they remember or forget. In the space between stars, in darkness that is not empty, but pregnant with potential, energies move that human instruments barely detect, forces that might be purely physical, or might carry consciousness, might be random quantum fluctuations, or might be the universe thinking. The watchers, if they watch still from their prisons, see these movements and understand their significance, knowledge that remains forbidden, not through divine jealousy, but through mercy, protecting humanity from truths that would shatter sanity. The night deepens around you, and in that deepening, boundaries grow thin between the world you know and world you can only imagine. Perhaps in dreams you will ascend as Enoch did, rising through layers of existence to glimpse the machinery of providence, the architecture of eternity, the faces of beings who remember when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. The thread unbroken. The journey we have traced tonight, from Ethiopian mountaintops to Qumran caves, from medieval monasteries to modern laboratories, reveals a text that refuses to remain buried despite repeated attempts at suppression. The Book of Enoch survives not through institutional preservation, but through the devotion of marginalized communities who recognized in its visions truths too essential to lose. Ethiopian Christians maintaining it as scripture when Rome declared it apocryphal. Jewish mystics preserving its angelology when rabbinical Judaism rejected it. Slavic monks copying variations that expanded rather than replaced its testimony. Each group that saved Enoch did so against prevailing authorities, choosing cosmic vision over comfortable orthodoxy. What does it mean that a book written before the flood, if we accept its claimed antiquity, speaks directly to contemporary anxieties? The Watcher's forbidden knowledge resonates with concerns about artificial intelligence and genetic engineering. The Nephilim's destructive consumption mirrors fears about unsustainable resource depletion. The promise of judgment offers hope that current injustices won't persist forever. Perhaps Enoch endures because it addresses perennial human concerns: the origin of evil, the possibility of transformation, the hope for justice, the fear of knowledge that exceeds wisdom. Living legacy, eternal questions. Today, the Book of Enoch exists in more editions, translations, and formats than ever in its long history. Yet multiplication of access hasn't produced consensus about meaning. Academic conferences debate its dating, while religious communities argue its authority. Scientists mine it for ancient astronomical observations, while mystics search it for keys to spiritual ascension. The text that was too strange for canonical inclusion remains too compelling for complete dismissal. In Ethiopia, the tradition continues unbroken. Monks still copy manuscripts by hand, preserving not just words, but the sacred act of transmission. Children learn Enochic stories, alongside biblical narratives, growing up in a worldview where angels remain active, where heaven has geography, where visions pierce the veil between dimensions. Their preservation extends beyond museum curation to lived tradition, Enoch not as artifact, but as ancestor, not as text, but as testimony. The questions Enoch raises echo through contemporary consciousness, even when their source remains unknown. Every story about fallen angels, from Paradise Lost to contemporary fantasy novels, carries Enochic DNA. Every speculation about ancient aliens or lost civilizations unconsciously rehearses Watcher narratives. Every hope for cosmic justice, every fear of ecological judgment, every dream of transformation beyond human limitation draws from wells Enoch first revealed. The text shapes imagination, even for those who've never read it, its visions encoded in culture's collective unconscious. Modern technology, rather than obsoleting ancient visions, seems to confirm aspects Enoch's original audiences couldn't appreciate. Quantum mechanics reveals reality's fundamental strangeness. multiple dimensions, mathematics requires, but senses can't perceive. Astronomy discovers the universe's vastness exceeds even Enoch's elaborate heavens. Genetics shows how information encoded in microscopic spirals determines macroscopic destiny. The cosmos proves stranger than ancient visions, imagined while validating their intuition that visible reality represents a fraction of what exists. Yet for all our scientific advancement, we remain as puzzled as Enoch's first readers by the fundamental questions and his visions address. Why does evil exist in a divinely ordered universe? What boundaries should limit human knowledge and power? How do individual choices affect cosmic harmony? What awaits consciousness after death? These questions persist not through ignorance but through depth, touching mysteries that transcend information, requiring wisdom rather than data, revelation rather than research. It's been a privilege to bring these calming chronicles to your evening. May ancient peace settle over you like a gentle blanket.